This is the end table plan of procedure step 10, which is the top to our end table. On the estimating sheet, the top sizes is 20 inches deep by 18.5 inches long, okay? And so we need to make a board that is that big, a panel that is that big. Now, you may have a board left over from when you did your sides that you can incorporate into this. It may be like about 2 inches wide and stuff. That's just fine. You'll just have to cut it to length, go through the same process that I'm going to go through. We won't have to worry about any width on it. This board here is 7 inches wide, and this is going to work great because I'll just make a couple cuts, and then when I set them side by side, I need enough to make 21 inches wide or more. And since 7, 7, and 7 equals 21, this will be perfect. It just kind of depends. You just need to get enough material to make it 19.5 inches long by 21 inches wide. Okay? So, I'm going to go through the same process as normal. We're going to cut off the cracks right here with the upcut saw, and then I'll cut this to length. Slide it in, get rid of this majority of this crack here. Okay, that's garbage now. Set our saw to 19.5. Cut these. Double check this here. Looks good. So now, when I lay these out, end to end here, edge to edge, and I measure this, that equals 21 inches, that's what I need. Just be smart, do some measuring, figure out how much material you need. Don't go cutting a whole bunch of extra pieces. Depending on the size of the board, you may need a few more pieces, or you may need even less pieces. It just depends. And then incorporate any other pieces that you have already into the top. Use those up, and then you can get new boards as needed. All right, the next step is to joint edges. Now, this is just a little bit different than we normally do, because we're actually going to joint both edges. And that's for gluing purposes, because we want to have nice clean edges when we do our gluing. So as long as the board is fairly straight and in good shape, then we're just going to go ahead and joint both edges. Makes it a little bit easier. Don't have to do as much sawing on the table saw. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Flip it over to the second edge. So now I've done both edges. Just do that with all the boards that need another straight edge. You may have boards that already have a straight edge that were cut off on the table saw. You don't need to joint those. Just any ones that have rough edges, go ahead and joint all the edges for them. All right, the next step is totally dependent upon how wide your board is, okay? On the paper it says if your board is 4 inches, 4.5 inches or less, then you can skip this step. But if you have a board that is 4.5 inches or more, then you're gonna need to go ahead and trim this. What you're gonna do is we're gonna cut it in half. And it doesn't have to be exactly half, just roughly half. And the reason for this is the wider the wood is in the regular board, the more likely it is to warp and so curve in your tabletop, and we're trying to alleviate that. And so by cutting it into smaller boards, it doesn't want to warp as easily. Now, this board happens to be 7 inches, a little bit less than 7 inches wide. And so half of 7 is 3.5, and that gets me plenty narrow enough to where I'm less than that 4.5 inch mark. And so I'm going to go ahead and set this to 3.5, maybe just a titch less, because I took off some and we're just a little less than 7. Like I said, it doesn't have to be exact half, but we're trying to make 2 boards that are less than 4.5 inches. Okay, and now I'm going to just rip all 3 of these boards down, so I'll have 6 boards that will be able to be glued together. All right, for the next step, we need to do some arranging of the boards so that we get the best look, the best fit possible, so our tabletop looks the best. Take a look at the paper. There's some tips here on doing this, about how to alternate the grain. You have to look at the end grain on the ends and making sure that the grain goes in the right directions and what looks nice. So right now, my biggest concern right here is just a couple things. Knots, usually knots. This one right here has kind of a knot in this corner and that I'm going to want to get rid of. So I'm going to make sure that's on the outside edge of the panel, because that'll get cut off later on, because this is oversized, and we'll trim this down to the exact size later on, and so that'll be easily cut off later on. I'm going to make sure that's on the outside edge. Otherwise, other knots, I may want to have that one down a little bit, and that's kind of a attractive one there. Just figure out what sides look the best. That's the first thing. Okay, so I want kind of all these up. Now I'm going to take a look at the ends here and just make sure that the grain doesn't all go the same way. They don't all curve the same way. Curve this way, curve this way. We want some curving down. We want some going straight. So these 2 boards actually came apart from each other, so that's not good to have them together that way. I'm going to go ahead and spin that around. That alternates the grain, and it may be hard, it's probably hard to see in there, but now the grain of the wood is all kind of going different directions. That's good. So this is kind of how I want my top to be laid out. We should be close to 20 inches here. Wide. We should be close to 21 inches wide. If we're not, you may have to add in another little board. And I'm actually, I'm about 19 and just under 20 inches. And so I might be a little bit small because the finished size is 20 inches. I might need to add another board when I glue it together. I'll find another little piece out of the scrap bin to put on this. But at this point, otherwise I'm ready. I'm going to go ahead and draw my triangle on here like this, so I know how things go together. I have that triangle drawn on there now, and it makes it really easy when I go gluing how things need to be put together. All right, we're at the gluing table here. I've got the boards ready to go. Make sure you take the time to set up the clamps. For this glue up, we're gonna need clamps that are at least the second, they're 24, what are they, 36-inch clamps? 36-inch clamps, or the longer ones, they're not the very shortest ones. Make sure you get long enough clamps. And I've got 3 clamps. We're gonna have 2 that are gonna be underneath, and then one that I've got right here next to these, ready to go, that's gonna actually go on top once we get glued up. So I'm gonna lay out the boards. And remember, we drew that triangle on it, and so that makes it really easy so that I know how they go back together. And then I ended up finding a board in the scrap bin that'll help me get it to the width that I need. It's got a little bit of a defect here, so I'm going to make sure that's on the outside. That'll get cut off pretty easily. And Okay, got them all here, looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and get these clamps ready. Now, when you do this, the easiest way is to stand up the furthest one and all the other ones except for the one that's closest to you. Stand them all up. Don't stand up this last one. Then we're gonna take the glue and we're just gonna put a bead of glue down each board. Okay? About 1/8 of an inch bead of glue. You can always add more if you need in the long run. And I might need more yet, because this is not squeezing out real good. This one's probably gonna need just a titch there and there. Okay, then spread it out. It doesn't have to spread on the entire board, but spread it out so it's covering a good 2/3 of the board. That's looking pretty good. I might need just a titch more right here, and I'm just going to put a little bit there that'll maybe titch there. Okay, those look good. Now, make sure you don't put glue against the clamps. So now I'm just going to put these back down, line up my lines, making sure the edges are nice, pretty close to flush and straight. All right, nice, flush and straight. Slide in the end of the clamp and slowly twist both clamps. Now, likely it's going to try to slide on you. Some may want to shift a little bit. Just work with it. Get it started. You'll start to see squeeze out. That's good. Okay. Keep things down tight. This one's trying to lift up a little bit. All right. Tighten those up. Then take this other one. We're going to put it on top here. In the middle. Always work in sets of 3 clamps. 2 on one side when you're gluing panels, 2 on one side, and 1 on the other. Okay, we got a great squeeze out on the whole thing. Let me lift it up here. You can maybe see a little bit better. Glue's squeezing out. You get some on the back side. Looks great. Make sure you write your name on it. 30 minutes to dry. After you remove it from the clamps, then you can get it graded, and then we'll go on to the next video, which is shaping and getting this to the right size.